Hello, everyone. Welcome to my new rebooted podcast, very excitingly named "What in the World." My sister actually came up with that name, and I have a very exciting and well-educated guest with me today from the Twitter account at Good King Solomon. We have Solomon.
Shalom, hello.
I'm really happy that you're here with me today.
Happy to be here.
So the reason that I asked Solomon to come on this podcast is because he is, for the longest time that I've known him, and that goes back to like the original account. He has been one of the most like insightful and wise people that I have been following. He's just, everything that he talks about is so like well thought through, and it's very insightful to me. So I wanted to get his opinion on the world today, because that's it's kind of hard to not talk about that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you. That was a fantastic introduction.
Oh, of course.
Really appreciate that. The world today, that is a large topic, and in 3,000 years since I was born, it's been well, a lot has changed and a lot hasn't.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that true?
Both of which are both happy and upsetting in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. So, what is? Let's start with the beginning of 2020, when everything started to go downhill. The COVID-19 coronavirus strand came over from China and started a pandemic across the entire planet.
Yes.
Were you personally affected by that at all? Do you have any family or friends that was affected by that, or just, from afar, quarantining and stuff like that?
Well, personally, I work in the wedding industry.
Oh.
Certainly works in my history.
Yes.
I have experience with weddings, at least 700 of them.
At least.
But so those were gone for at least 3 months ahead. So I've been unemployed for 3-4 months at the moment. Looks like things might be happening in July.
That's good.
But
that's a step in the right direction.
Right.
And then since then, everything has been thrown off.
Exactly. So I personally have always kind of felt of myself as kind of more of a watcher than exactly an activist.
That's fair.
This being out of work, I've watched everything just decay in front of me, and it's been kind of an odd dichotomy, because personally my life is all right. I'm kind of stable. It's decently beautiful weather over here. And I turn on the news or I go on Twitter, and every single day we have reached another stage of the apocalypse.
Yeah, I was interested to. You were honestly the first person that I thought of when I wanted to record this podcast, because I was like, all this is everything happening here is very like biblical, very Revelations. What biblical figure should I pull in to talk about this? So it worked out fairly well.
That works. I appreciate that.
And it's really crazy, like we are in what feels like end times, because since January of 2020, nothing has really gotten better.
Oh no, it's one thing compiling on top of another, and we haven't finished we haven't even fixed the first problem, and now we have like 10 more problems on top of that.
Yes. If there is one silver lining to all of this, though, it's that it is bringing people together.
Oh,
It's
completely.
it's really crazy. And the whether it be like families being brought together in quarantine, or
Hmm.
just communities pulling together for our next topic, which is the Black Lives Matter movement,
Absolutely. And
which
that I have been, uh, of course, the problem that is being addressed is horrific, and
mm-hmm,
systemic racism has it's existed for 400 years in America and
mm,
longer in the world. This
right,
isn't something that happened overnight.
mm-hmm,
But what we're seeing with these protests is every state in the union, countries on every other continent are all standing together in solidarity for a cause that in any religion is just.
right. It's crazy. It's I forget who said it, but with all 50 states and at least 18 countries outside the
Hmm.
US, it's the largest civil rights movement in the world.
In
And
terms of sheer people power, it is.
yeah, and it's crazy. And I really really hope that there's actual change coming from it.
And I'm seeing some things change, but it's only changing after absolute unrelenting protest.
Yeah, that's what. And at the beginning of this I was like arguing with people nonstop because I remember seeing the fires being set and businesses being burned down, and
Hmm.
I was kind of on the side of it. Honestly, I was on the side of, yeah, you know what? Let the companies burn. Let these buildings fall, and they're just material things. It's not human life.
Hmm.
Now, after reflecting for a little bit, obviously the whole reason that this is happening is because they don't want excessive violence,
Right.
specifically against black people. So I've reflected, and I don't think that violence is the answer, but it's what we needed at the beginning, because the only time that things change in history is by violence. Everyone looks at
Hmm.
the civil rights movements of the 60s, and yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a peaceful protester, but all of those protests ended with uh, black people being arrested or hit with fire hoses. And it, and Pride Month, the first Pride was a riot where um, transgender homeless people in New York set a building on fire.
Oh,
um,
absolutely. The Stonewall.
yeah, and I don't want to advocate for violence, but it happens,
It's
and it's
natural.
yeah.
And we as humans with society, we like to think ourselves above, violence.
Mm-hmm.
But when things are systemic and there is oppression that builds and builds and builds, like
Mm-hmm.
even I, I heard a quote recently. It's a privilege to learn about racism rather
Mm.
than experience it.
Yeah. Yeah,
As
that's true.
I, I personally haven't quite experienced myself as an Irish born person,
Mm-hmm.
like, um, but even I have been traumatized for decades of
Mm-hmm.
just watching African Americans, Native Americans, people of color, LGBTQ people who in all communities I've grown to love members of every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just I've watched murder just on Twitter, on
Yeah.
Facebook, on the news for years. I was um I was 9 years old when I heard the song 41 Shots by Bruce Springsteen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a song about the police murder of Amadou Diallo in 19, I want to say 99, 97, somewhere
Yeah,
around
something
there.
like that. Yeah.
Uh, Man was accosted at his own home, came outside. They were asking him to like get down. He reached for his wallet to identify himself,
Mm-hmm.
and the police opened fire and fired 41 shots into him. And I didn't learn about it on the news. I learned about it in 2001 when Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about it,
Yeah.
which is now 19 years old.
Isn't that
And
like that's like
the list of names beyond that has grown exponentially.
it's terrifying. I
And yeah, it's
go,
gotten to the point that the final straw has fallen on the stack and it's tumbling down.
mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. And some of them are like they don't even try to hide it. Like with the Ahmaud Arbery case. They hunted him. And it was
that wasn't even a police violence. That was vigilante racist murder.
Yeah, and they killed him, and I posted a thing on my Facebook this morning saying that we have grown as a society to rationalize the killing of black people who do crime. You know?
Right, which we do not apply to any other person.
Exactly, and I genuinely don't understand it because I go through these posts and people are saying, well, George Floyd was high as a kite and he was using a fake $20 bill. That doesn't excuse the fact that he was murdered. You know,
right?
He wasn't.
I've been high as a kite. I don't know if I've ever passed a counterfeit bill, but if I did, I don't imagine that I would have been murdered for it.
Yeah, and it's sad and disgusting, and you know, I was so I grew up in a little bit of a rough area. We're currently the fourth most dangerous city in Pennsylvania. Yeah, it's a title that we hold dear.
I understand that. I looked up recently, and the city that I live in the Northwest is apparently safer than 1% of other cities.
Wow. That's
which is a weird statistic because
it is
I've
weird.
lived here and never felt unsafe.
That is curious. But so I've you know, the police force in my town has always been really great because you know it's a small town. It used to be a huge mining town.
Yes.
Big like steel foundries and everything, and because you know Pennsylvania, that's what we're all about. So I got pulled over one time. There's my town, and then there's the town north of us, and they have an active KKK charter there, and they're horrible. But I had a friend that I was dropping off. We went to go see a movie, and I was dropping her off at her house, and I was driving back and driving into my town, and I drive an old car. I drive a 2002 Chevy Monte Carlo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's something else. But I was just driving along, and I got pulled over. And I was like on the highway back, and this cop pulls up, and he says, "Oh, boy, am I glad you're not black." And I was like, "Me too, I guess." 'Cause, like,
oh my goodness!
Like, what am I supposed to say? This cop pulls me over because he saw my crappy car. He didn't even like give me a ticket for anything. He was like, I was like, so why did you pull me over? And he was like, oh, should check your head or you
Racism?
check your tail lights. And I was like, okay, my tail lights were fine. But he didn't give me a ticket or anything. That's all he said to me. And
And the leaves you with the question of, so what would you have done if I was black?
it, we live in a very terrifying world right now, and I can't imagine, like, yeah, I'll never understand what black people and people of color go through, but I've witnessed it firsthand, and it's just I can't believe that it took this long, you know?
Oh, completely.
Like I really don't understand, like, how are we at that point where, now there are places in the United States that are claiming autonomy because they are tired of the police. How are we allowing there to be police officers who invaded a woman's home and shot her while she slept? Like
These are the questions we're asking right now, and they don't have good answers.
it's just the only answer is just because that's the way it's always been.
And that's not good enough anymore.
It's definitely not good enough. You told me that you were playing gigs at the Black Lives Matter protest.
Yes, I played, I jammed with a rapper and a harp player at a protest recently.
That's awesome. How did that go?
They went decently well. Rainstorm happened unexpectedly in the middle of it, but
That's what you get for living in the Pacific Northwest. Or
yeah, it got rid of about half the crowd, but the ones that stayed loved what they saw.
That's cool. Was it like like a benefit thing? Like people were like donating, and then you guys would just keep playing?
It was basically a protest similar to the ones that have been happening, but rather than specifically Black Lives Matter, it was a specifically defund the police based protest. So educating people that came on what the idea of police abolition actually means.
That's really cool. I don't know if I've told you this before, but I go to school in New Jersey.
Okay.
And I am I'm in North Jersey, so it's it's like it's more of a New York vibe up there. It's all like big like Richie houses, but my girlfriend lives in South Jersey, and she's not too far from Camden, and Camden right now, while Minneapolis is on the way to doing it, is the only city that has ever completely dissolved and reformed their police in the United States.
Did that happen recently, or have they've already done it?
That happened in 2012, and so Camden for the longest time was considered to be the poor part of Philadelphia because it's just across the river. Not only that, but it was also it had one of the highest violent crime rates in the country. So what they realized...
Interesting how those two things
isn't
coincide.
Isn't that funny? They realized that the reason that there's so much violent crime is because there are cops going out arresting people and then being violent so that they get a more violent charge when they fight back. So,
exactly.
Yeah, and so what the city of Camden did was they looked at it and they were like, that's not okay. So they fired every single one of the police officers in the entire city of Camden. And then they only hired back 100 of them because they passed a bias test.
Wow.
And then they hired, I think, 400 more police officers from all over the country that could pass their bias test. And when they hire a new police officer, they did this back in 2012 as well when they reformed the police in Camden. They designated certain areas for each police officer. So like this police officer only has jurisdiction in this section of Camden.
Interesting.
And they made them go to that section and go up to each individual house and introduce themselves and gave them their badge number. And they called it community-based or community-oriented policing. So each of the police officers, like everyone in the entire community, knew who their cops were. And when they had
that sounds like a much better system,
isn't it? Like you'd think
and it
so.
honestly sounds like the same system as like your RA in college.
Exactly. You know, your RA gets this floor. Everyone knows them. They
It's
take
like, hey, if you need help, I'm the person you first contact, and I'll get in contact with other people.
Exactly. And you know, they're hired through a rigorous process to make sure that they understand how to be a leader of a bunch of college kids while they're a college kid themselves.
Exactly.
So, you know, why is it that police officers who we are giving leftover military weapons only have to go through an 8-week training session and then they're just free to roam the streets? You know, it feels like we should probably be holding them to a higher standard.
And I completely agree with that.
I think that it'll be interesting to see what Minneapolis does, because they dissolved their police department and they're in the process of reforming it. And
their council voted to disband the police department.
And I hope that they follow what Camden did, because over the last 7 years, their violent crime rate in the city of Camden has dropped by 46%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That speaks for itself.
Right? It's like, you know, we have a very... And, you know, it's probably not going to help in every city.
Right.
Because, you know, nothing works 100% of the time. And everyone on the opposing side is going to be like, well, it didn't work here, so it's not going to work everywhere.
Right, and you will always get anecdotal evidence of problems, but that logic isn't applied in this case. In the current system we have. They're like, but in the current system we have, people are getting murdered.
It's, you know, nothing is perfect, but anything is better than where we're at right now.
Exactly.
I was at a protest in my town, and one of the coolest things, because I don't think that I've seen it anywhere else, at least not on the news. They had, it was organized on Facebook. They were like, everyone come out, we're gonna protest, be there at 4, and everyone got there at 4, but the protest didn't actually start until 5, because at 4 they had an hour where they had a huge like setup where people could just go up and get registered to vote in case they weren't already.
Well, that's brilliant.
Right? Like they're like, hey, in case you're not registered to vote, hop over there and you can get that. If you are registered to vote, then the clergy of the town have come together and they're giving away free snacks and free water across the street. So,
well, that's fantastic.
Right? And it was, there was like a couple of the mosques. There's only one synagogue in my town, but a bunch of churches. They were all of the preachers were all together and just handing out stuff and standing up, and it was pretty cool because there aren't that many like.
See, that's humanity,
right? It was really cool, and there were police officers, not like walking in front of the crowd, but they were like integrated into the crowd. And I see a lot of stuff now that it's like, oh, you know, these people are like these cops are taking a knee and then they're getting up and like fighting back the protesters when the cameras turn off.
They're just kind of token gestures.
Yeah, and I was really happy to know that didn't happen in my town. I was there for a couple hours. It got a lot of local media coverage.
Mm-hmm.
But the cops in my town, I'm pretty sure at least like 50% of the police officers are people of color, just because the majority of people in my town are people of color.
Which doesn't always fix the system. Just
Right. Yeah. No. But
yeah.
it's a sign that some people are working together.
Certainly.
So you are not that far from the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, correct?
Yes, or I believe it's now the Capitol Hill Occupied Protest.
Oh,
They're working on
changed it.
some name changes. It's the CHOP now.
What was it you that posted the thing about oh yeah, here it is, the potential replacement names. I like the Soviet Union.
Right, that was Fox News, believe it or not.
I know.
I believe they were attempting some sort of comedy now. It seems news doesn't work out for them.
Yeah, I mean, what did they got in like big trouble last week because they were showing pictures of like doctored pictures on the news, and they got sued for it or something.
Yeah, so one guy showed up to the CHOP in like battle armor with an with a modded AR-15 kind of thing.
Oh, interesting.
And Second Amendment rights. I've seen a million people show up with that kind of gear to things less than that.
Right.
And somebody got a picture of him, and Fox News just like cut out his picture
and put it in a bunch of stuff.
Into every picture of the protest. So it was like a Where's Waldo of this random,
where's this
dude with like random apparent Antifa dude with a gun, for some reason popping up in every random protest from different weeks in the same outfit and pose. And so the city of Seattle actually like threatened legal action, and Fox News had to take down all of their reporting on it.
Good. Some of these, like, you can tell that they're such an elitist network because one of the potential replacement names is just Chicago.
Right? That's just like... Seriously? Half of their, like, programming is just dunking on blue states. It's like most of this country isn't America as far as they are concerned.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember a couple months ago, Trump posted a video of him as Darth Vader?
Oh, I think I do.
And everyone was like, does anyone want to tell him that Darth Vader's a genocidal crazy person?
Well, they've done it a few times. I believe his campaign manager referred to their campaign as a Death Star once.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you guys realize that you're the bad guy?
I love the Seattle United Communist Kale supporters, and that being the acronym of SUCKS. And it's like...
It's like they're trying.
The fourth estate
comedy.
The fourth estate is entirely dead because these guys like that's not even
honestly that it's like they're getting paid 5 to 6 figure salaries to do open mic level comedy.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? It's
so like honestly, abolish Fox News along with the police.
I'm okay with that. I think I was talking to my dad about this yesterday, and he thinks that Fox News is going to go under once Trump is gone because they're not going to have anything to talk about.
Oh yeah, who are they going to stand behind? Where's their credibility going to be?
It's it'll certainly be interesting.
Oh yeah, they'll probably get a few years out of mocking the Democrats, but.
Do you you said that you posted a couple pictures of people, like you had friends in CHOP, right?
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who live in Capitol Hill
That's crazy.
because, it's a neighborhood.
How are they? How are they doing in there?
Well, it's basically like a street music festival just popped up outside of their house, and they are no longer hearing flashbangs and tear gas grenades going off from a week straight of protests.
Wow. And
Yeah,
so it's
the police abandoned the precinct, thinking that, oh, this will be our excuse, just like let them burn it down. And the people didn't, and just rejoiced that the police were gone.
and now they're just hanging out and you know
Yeah,
being by
there's like
themselves.
street murals and taco trucks and community gardens and a live theater in the park.
There was I forget. I know one of them was in Nashville, but there are three total, or four total, including Chop and Nashville.
Yeah,
Other
some people got
autonomous zones.
inspired and they're doing their own thing.
That'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're practically like states within themselves, right? Like they can pretty much do anything they want there because there's no policing. Um,
More or less.
yeah,
The actual legal logistics of it are certainly difficult because, like, technically, they're still in the cities.
right,
The police still have jurisdiction over the larger city,
right,
but they don't have a precinct there. They don't have an active presence there. It's like we've removed the base from that area.
right.
So they have to come in from outside. And so the people there are just living their lives, being peaceful, and the only option that the police would have or anyone would have to stop it is to actually be violent.
Right, forceful entry.
So there's almost kind of a Buddhist protest to it that, what, we're just going to move in here, sit down, be peaceful.
And you
If you
can't
want us
stop
out,
us.
you're going to have to start.
You're gonna have to be the bad guy.
Exactly.
And I don't think that they're going to.
No.
And that begs the question: how long are they going to keep it up? You know,
I do wonder, and I'm interested to see how far it will keep going. But knowing, especially Seattle, uh, there is a huge hippie artist community. It's like this, and the Chaz is currently happening while everybody is unemployed, and Seattle is like 90% unemployed liberal artists and coders, and
right?
like program developers. So their populace is gonna be fine.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me because they really can just like as long as they're keeping themselves healthy. Like you said that they were having open air gardens, right?
Right.
Like
And then the other thing is there are still businesses in that
Yeah.
area. Like one of my ramen shops is now in the Chop, and they're just open. If you want to go to a store, like it's still a neighborhood. The only difference is there's not police.
I wonder if eventually they will create their own. Like if they plan to keep this up for a long time, obviously they're gonna need some sort of security or safety
Right.
force.
And they are, of course, going to need to work out something with the city because the Chop is currently residing in a major thoroughfare in Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
So traffic in Seattle is already awful. I can only imagine what they're doing to it.
Yeah.
So they're gonna have to do some like stepping up and actually have some community organizations and meet with city leaders.
I hope so.
But I have faith that they can do that.
I would genuinely love to see a fully functioning autonomous zone within the United States because it would be such a slap in the face to the far right.
Oh yeah.
Like just everyone that identifies with being on the far right because we've been...
And it's the perfect argument because it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And people can go check it out. They can see it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's direct, tangible evidence of this experiment being played out. It's like, you have an argument against it, go see for yourself. Go walk around this beautiful neighborhood.
Do they have walls? Is it like walled up, or how do they?
Basically, they took all of the like leftover police barriers and any fencing they could find, and like traffic.
Oh, so they're being resourceful.
Yes, they're just kind of spider webbing together police and construction barriers from the area, and have created just kind of walls.
That's really
Just
cool.
enough that you couldn't like drive through the area.
That's that's really cool.
Yeah, you
That
can still just like walk right in.
yeah. I'm really intrigued to see how far it'll go. Like not just like
Hmm.
time wise, but I really love to see like how deep into this do they plan on going? Because
Right.
if it's working for them, who's to say that they're gonna stop? You know?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, like I can see it becoming just this like self-sustaining, autonomous, continual music festival kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
'Cause I've been to a few music festivals, and I've often thought that the community that can arise in like a few days, like if the apocalypse hit and you were at a music festival,
You'd
you
be in
might
good
actually
hands.
survive. Like those
Yeah.
people, like somebody once called it collective effervescence. It's
Hmm.
the idea that a group of people all happy is tangible.
That's cool. That collective effervescence.
Hmm.
Huh. That should be the name of this episode.
Or you
Um,
can use it.
that's really cool, and I agree. You know, these people are in good spirits and they're supporting each other,
Hmm.
and they're fighting for what they believe in, and that's something that the people we are opposing often don't get because they are whenever they have a problem, they're always so angry about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it just anything that they don't believe in is
Hmm.
wrong and doesn't deserve to be a part of our society.
Exactly. And those are the same people that like to call liberals snowflakes for disliking racism.
I think that is the funniest thing because
Hmm.
so a couple weeks ago I decided that I was going to stop talking politics on my Earth account.
How long? That didn't last long.
Well, in my opinion, I still haven't talked about politics. I'm
Hmm.
talking about simply human rights, and
True.
human rights, in my opinion, aren't politics. That's why I'm okay with talking
Absolutely.
about it.
Absolutely. And honestly, so many people have dismissed everything as political that isn't political. Like
Yeah.
politics is politicians running government. It's not civil rights, it's not gender, it's not race. Those aren't politics. Those
Those,
are people.
yeah. It's a matter of people being who they deserve to be,
Hmm.
and them confusing that as politics proves that they're not ready to have that conversation because they don't understand how people work.
Right.
When we're upset about something, we're passionate about it because all we want is love. Like we want everyone to just love each other, everyone to get
Right.
along, and they want nothing but we're right, and if you don't submit to that, then you don't deserve rights, and that's just not cool. I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, that argument doesn't hold any water.
And so I took all of my political opinions off of my Twitter account, and now
Hmm.
I post about it all the time on my personal Facebook page,
Ah,
like with me as a person talking out to my friends and family. And man, it is. I'd really love to know how many people have muted me because of how much I'm talking about
oh,
it.
I kind of am the opposite. Like I was on Facebook a long time before I was on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and Facebook got to the point that it had weeded down to only people that agree with me.
That's fair. I'm
And so it was anytime I posted on Facebook, it was like I was preaching to the choir or just ranting to my friends and concerning my family.
Yeah, that's fair. I
Hmm.
don't really have many friends that are um, opposed to what I'm talking about, but you know, everyone has old family that
Oh, yes.
falls into that area.
We all have
Um,
that one backwards uncle.
yeah. Um, and I know that sometimes my family listens to my podcast, so I won't name anyone specific. But you know, it's you know, even if they were listening, they would probably be clicked off by now. But it's you know, they just come from a different time, and that's not really an excuse, but it's a way to understand why they're thinking that way. Um, but it doesn't make me like it any less. You know, their opinions still piss me off, and they keep fighting me on things. And at one point recently, I was just like, "Oh, so you're just ignoring facts now? Okay, that's cool."
Working again. Things are
Okay,
back up and running.
good. All right,
All right.
so
So, Mother Nature, I guess you messed with me a little bit.
yeah, just a little bit. It wouldn't be a regular podcast if there weren't technical difficulties.
Certainly, and it adds to the immersion,
Yeah,
talking to Earth, and I get hit by a bunch of wind.
of course. So where were we at? I don't
Hmm.
remember. Um,
Well, we were talking about the Chaz and the Chop,
mm-hmm.
and what's coming out of that, and
I think I the last thing I said was that it would be. I'm interested to see how far they'll go. You know, not just with time wise, but also just like in general. Like, do you think that
absolutely.
eventually they might just be like, yeah, you know, maybe we don't need the United States anymore, and they'll just become a micro country?
I think it would have to go a lot farther than that. Honestly, I think it might just become like a public park, essentially,
Mm,
just kind of a like a people's area.
mm. That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
But there would have to be a lot of regulation in place for that to happen. Because like
absolutely.
once you make
But it
it,
is already just a functioning part of a city. So like
yeah,
people still live there, people still work there, there are businesses still running in the area.
and then the next thing would be how far will that grow? You know, like how far outside of Capitol Hill are things like that going to happen? Are there going to be, you know,
I think we're
tens?
going to see attempts
Yeah,
kind of across the country.
and that would certainly be a step in an interesting direction.
Hmm.
And you know, if it
Though
works,
it's
then
kind of it's going to be interesting to see if it can be recreated because the Chaz was a strangely organic process. You you can't exactly recreate running the police out of their precinct.
yeah, definitely, because you know everywhere is different.
Hmm.
Different communities, different cultures. I
Hmm.
think Seattle was probably one of the best places for it to work out.
Yeah. Yes.
If it were to happen, you know, in like Maine or
Hmm.
like Tallahassee, then it would be a whole different ball game because it's just they're different parts of the country. There are different people there, and they handle things differently.
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of been in our blood for a long time.
Mm.
1975, there was this book written called Ecotopia,
Hmm.
and it was basically this idea of a future uh, breaking of the United States, and it all starts basically in Seattle, and a country is created out of Washington, Oregon, Northern California, and like a little bit of British Columbia.
Hmm. And what was that called again?
It was called Ecotopia.
Ecotopia. I'll have to look into that. That looks pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds cool. I love stuff like that. There's a cool book called Legend, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're kind of headed down that way because there's a map in the front of the book, and it shows you a map of the United States as it is in the book. All of the shorelines have risen because of climate change and the ice caps melting. So all of these coastal cities have receded past the Rockies and the Appalachian Mountains. And the United States, or what was the United States, is in a civil war. And it's basically divided east versus west. And the whole thing is like it follows this kid named Day. And he is, trying to, he's like a kid on the run, so he's like viewed as a criminal against the state and whatever.
Right.
And he's trying to like uncover all these secrets of this country that is at war with itself, and nobody knew what the original United States was called. I believe it was I forget what the opposing side was, but like the east side was known as the colonies, for obvious reasons.
Right.
But they were like talking about the origin of the country was like outlawed, and so he didn't know what the United States was, but his father gave him a necklace that had a quarter in it, and it had the United States. And then he starts to ask questions. He's like, we've been fighting for centuries and we have no idea why. We don't know what started this war. And I feel like we're kind of headed down that way. And I don't want to advocate for violence at all, but
but the divisions that we have at this time, if they are allowed to continue, will lead to that kind of a thing. Is people raised with entirely parallel views of reality.
Yeah. And I don't see the US moving in any good directions as long as our current administration is in.
At the current moment, I am seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
Though, with the perspective of history, this isn't the first time that an empire has fallen.
Yeah. And, though we're in a modern era, the United States pretty much is, it's on all accounts an empire.
Oh, absolutely. We just don't use the term anymore.
We don't use the term. But, there's the American empire stretches far and wide to many countries, and with the use of embassies now, we have say in at least small parts of different countries.
Right, we have a presence everywhere.
Yeah, and for better or for worse, that's something that we're just gonna have to either put up with or get rid of. There's not really
the United States has always been referred to as the Great Experiment.
Yeah, because it is.
Like, it is one of the largest. It is the largest country to ever exist with a democratic system, to not become an empire. And so at this point, we're at kind of similar, feels like the fall of the Roman Republic.
Yeah, I agree.
Not
with
the fall of the Roman Empire, but
the
like
Republic.
when Julius Caesar, the Shakespeare play Julius Caesar. They were a democratic republic. They had a senate, and it looked like their new leader, Julius, was set to become an emperor. That the republic was going to fall, and it was going to fall into fascism. So the story, of course, of Julius Caesar is the Senate decides to assassinate the potential emperor, and
And
in doing so, only cause the fall of the empire.
yep. It's I have a really big, like, 5-foot map of the United States on my
Mm,
wall, and I'm just looking up at it, and you know, it would be really interesting, because if the United States as a government and a country itself falls, there are going to be states that try to survive on their own.
mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm aware, there's nothing stopping them from doing that. Like, if the United States stops being a country,
Right.
which would take, hundreds of years.
Certainly.
But if it does, then I'm sure that there are state governments that are going to try and survive, but we kind of dug ourselves into a hole, because
Absolutely.
no,
No single state, well, with the actual exception of Washington,
mm-hmm,
has all of the resources to be self-sufficient.
yeah, I like, just looking at, like, and that includes, like a military presence, or
Mm-hmm.
a resources, like food and water and fuel. No
Right.
state, with the exception of Washington, could survive on their own, which means that there are going to be probably coalitions and small, like, mini countries based
Mm-hmm.
on, like, certain states, like,
Right.
and
It's like the ecotopia idea, and the
mhm,
reason that happens is because uh, the West Coast, we have everything we
mhm.
need. Like, we actually could survive.
Yeah.
I think about this a lot. If Washington itself were to secede and become an independent state, it
Mhm.
wouldn't. It would probably benefit us and actually hurt the entire country. Because
Yeah.
if you took Washington out of the United States,
Mhm.
you would remove uh, one of the largest energy producers in the world, including the Hoover Dam system.
Mhm.
You would remove some of our largest nuclear researching institutions.
Mhm.
You would take out Boeing. You would take out Amazon. You would take Microsoft, and the third largest port in the United States,
That is,
which
wow.
third largest port, but our single largest port to Asia.
Yeah, that's really crazy.
Like, that's, and it enrages me when I see Trump and all of these people dissing on Washington or these blue states. It's like, do
Mhm.
you not realize that most of the things that people like about America come from blue states?
That's true. I was really genuinely shocked, because so I live in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state.
Mm,
Um, it changes with every election, and I was too young to vote last time.
hmm.
So I was just hoping that Pennsylvania would vote blue, and they didn't. Pennsylvania ended up being red in the last election. Um,
It happened a lot in the last election.
but I was looking at the primary, and there were more people that voted for one of the three Democratic candidates than voted for the just Trump alone. There were two other
Hmm.
Republican candidates. They didn't get more than 40,000 votes each.
Yes.
But I feel like if they're voting for anyone but Trump in the primary, then they, at least half of them, aren't going to vote for him in the general election.
Certainly.
So I
And
think,
many swing states that, or even states that were red states, have become swing states.
yeah, that's true.
Texas, they're neck and neck,
Mm-hmm. I have I
which is
have a
unheard of.
I have a lot of friends that go to school with me in Jersey that are
Mm.
actually from Texas,
Ah,
and I have friends in, like, Austin and Dallas and Fort Worth, And I just talked to them, and they're like, yeah, it's really mostly like Democrats where we are. It's not that. It's not like the yee countryside that everyone thinks
Mm-hmm.
Texas is. That's Alabama. Um,
Well, there's this interesting. My dad always refers to it as political schizophrenia in state,
mm, yeah, that
and
makes sense.
it in Washington we have this interesting case of like if you actually look at the county maps, there
Mm-hmm.
are a few very blue counties, like the Seattle County
Mm-hmm.
is blue,
Right.
but all of these rural counties
Mm-hmm.
are red.
Yeah.
So if you're taking county by county, it's like it's like 46 red counties to 5 blue counties. But
But
in those
most of the
5 blue counties
that's where most of the
are
population is.
like 85% of the population.
Yeah, that's how Pennsylvania is too. We have there. It's actually more blue than you'd think. There are a lot of like light blue
Mm-hmm.
counties, but the deep blue ones are like where I'm from, which is just outside of Philly, out near Pittsburgh, and those like surrounding areas, and Harrisburg, right in the center of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at, we always say that there are three parts to Pennsylvania. There's the Philly side, the Pittsburgh side, and right in the center is Pennsylvania, and it's just miles of racism and corn. And then
That
somewhere,
sounds a lot like us.
yeah, somewhere mixed in there, you get like Hershey Park.
Mm-hmm.
um, it's interesting, and I'm really eager to see where the United States goes within this next year. Because as of recording this, we have 217 days until Trump leaves office, assuming that he loses the election.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
roughly 5 months until the election
until
that
the
decides
election.
that.
And, you know, time is flying.
Yes.
I think that I really, really hope that we're headed in the right direction. But, a lot of people are saying that, um, these movements aren't being shown on their timelines. People aren't seeing stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which, that could mean anything. Are social
There's an
media, like, are they,
there's an interesting effect on the internet. Bad news travels faster than good news,
yeah, that's true. So,
and you see it in comments. People are more likely to leave a bad review than a good review. If you buy something and it works,
then you're like, oh,
that's
cool.
what it's supposed to do. If you
Yeah,
buy something that doesn't work, you're mad.
yeah, that's true.
And so I think we mentioned it earlier when the riots happened, when things burned, uh, people took notice
Yeah, it was getting a lot of attention.
and morally debated whether or not, everybody saw it.
Yeah, and and that kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. Like, people have been peacefully protesting for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone saw Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem, and that was an outrage because he was apparently being disrespectful to the troops and the country and whatever. But he was peacefully protesting, which he had the right to
Exactly.
do. And,
They got mad at that.
they kicked him out, and then he
Mm-hmm.
continued to be vocal about it, but he didn't have that stage anymore to do that.
Right.
So no one cared.
Yeah.
And now, you know, we had violent protests.
Right.
They
And
turned.
that's like, oh, well, now you've gone too far. It's like, well, when we didn't
You
go
weren't
this
listening to
far,
us.
you didn't listen.
And so, how long, like, what is it going to take for us as a country to take those next steps before things turn violent again? Because people are going to get fed up of just screaming into a void. They're
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
there's gonna be more buildings that are gonna get burned. There are going to be more uh, autonomous zones across the United States. There's gonna be an uprising, and it's already happening. So
Absolutely. And both sides are getting angry in their own way.
Mhm.
Like the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone happened because we were all fighting for justice.
Right.
And now you have, I've heard reports of Proud Boys are now trying to ride on the Chaz to go like kick them out.
Yeah, that I don't understand that. You know,
It
the
doesn't make any sense.
Proud Boys. First off, stupid name.
Right.
Second off, proud of what? What
Right.
what are they fighting for other than bigotry?
They really can't give much of a good reason.
And they never will be able to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it has been really lovely talking to you.
This has been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, definitely. I think that once this goes up and Spirit listens to it, that he'll want to hop on here and we can all three of us have a discussion and
Oh, that would be fantastic.
just tear down the internet with that.
I haven't spoken with the Holy Spirit in, it's been millennia.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
Everyone, go follow Good King Solomon on Twitter. Do you have anything that you'd like to promote and put out into the universe?
Just some good vibes. It doesn't matter what race, what religion. There's somewhere in your past that someone has taught that you need to rise against oppression and keep fighting for it. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you're from. This cause right now is the cause of humanity.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you would like to hear more, make sure that you subscribe if you're on YouTube and like and leave a comment and see what else you'd like to hear us talk about. If you are on Spotify, feel free to share it and let everyone know what you thought. Let me know what you thought. You know, you can tweet it at me and tell me, hey, shut up, or hey, you're doing a good job. Whatever you feel like. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you next time.
Shalom Adonai.